Okay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Tanya and You, Chapter 10. Chapter 10 is where it starts to get exciting time. So we have laid down the groundwork to understand the war itself, right? We ended off talking about in chapter 9 about this war, this battle, this perpetual battle that we have throughout our life. And we had to understand what the battle is about. There are two sides to every fight. What do they want? First of all, who is fighting? And what is their goals in this fight? What's considered a victory for each side? We spoke about the two souls that are within us. We have the godly soul and the animalistic soul, and each of them are fighting for territory. They want full control. They want full control on both layers of the person. We want control of the mind and heart. Our feelings, our personality should be only filled, our heart should be filled with only godly pursuits, godly impulses. We should be excited for something godly, for something altruistic. We should have a love only for godly things. That's A. And B, the second layer, the more superficial layer, is the expression of it in our garments of the soul, as we call it, thought, speech, and actions. Also, there, we should only use our thought, speech, and action every single moment for the godly soul wants its control, and the animal soul wants its control over these two layers. That's the fight. That's the battle. Now, for the next three chapters, chapter 10, 11, and 12, we talk about the various positions in victory. It's a battle. It's a struggle. How successful are you? And we have different names. We divide it into three and perhaps even five different categories of where I am at in this battle. We're at the front lines. You could win, you could lose, back and forth, but there's always a front line in every battle. Where's my front line today? Where am I at? I had a battle this morning. I had a battle last night. So, where am I today? Where's the front line? And we talk about a tzaddik, a righteous person. We talk about a Russia, a wicked person. And then we speak about a Beinoni, someone like in the middle, in between, an average, like an average guy. Now, that's a very unsophisticated, superficial way of describing a righteous, a wicked, and a Beinoni. The Tanya goes into great detail to describe what exactly is each of these levels. And this is all in our struggle, in our battle between these two souls. How successful are we today? Spoiler alert, the end of this is going to be that a tzaddik, the way the Tanya describes it, is way above an average person. But, to reach this level of tzaddik. A Beinoni is where we should strive to be at. It isn't easy, but a Beinoni is something that each and every one of us could be at least for periods of times. And we describe that a wicked person, a Russia, is not necessarily that wicked. So we'll see how it is developed over chapter 10, 11, and 12. But today we're focusing on chapter 10. And in chapter 10, the focus is from the top. We start with the tzaddik. the righteous person. And the Tanya talks about there are two levels of a righteous person, a complete tzaddik and an incomplete tzaddik. But what is a tzaddik? Perhaps we've heard the word tzaddik before. Tzaddik is loosely translated as a righteous person. Okay, I know many righteous people. A righteous person who does righteous things, lives a righteous life. What exactly is the definition of a righteous person, a tzaddik, in the Tanya? Because in the Talmud and in other areas of Torah, when we refer to someone as a tzaddik, we often mean someone who has 51% of their day, of their life, is righteous. They are majority righteous. They generally do the right thing. That's a righteous person. Someone who does 90%, 95% of their time, of their decisions are righteous decisions. They are a righteous person, a big tzaddik. But the Tanya says no. Tanya says that is true in that context. But in the context that we're talking about, in this battle, in this struggle between the two souls, a tzaddik is all the way on top. So much so where perhaps it's hard to even relate to what a tzaddik is. And the truth is, the average person can never attain this level of tzaddik. Because he says, you know what a tzaddik is? A tzaddik is someone who is completely victorious over this war. A tzaddik means the war is over. We can put the arms down. We're done. There's no truce. There's no two sides that are working things out. There is only one side. The nefesh ha'elokis, our godly soul, has completely, totally destroyed the animal soul, any type of negativity, any type of klipa, any type of ego, any type of self. It's only the nefesh ha'elokis, it's only godly, which means not only in thought, speech, and action, that all of my thoughts are godly thoughts, altruistic, selfless thoughts. All of my speech is only proper speech. I never slip. I never by mistake gossip or say something I shouldn't say. And of course, all of my actions, every single one of them, is only proper actions and action which expresses my connection to God. Not only that, which already is extremely high level to attain, but even my heart, even my inside. I have no urge to do something wrong. I have no impulse. I have no temptations. Because a temptation comes from where? Who is causing this temptation? The animal soul, right? If I'm fully victorious, if I have slaughtered, if I have destroyed, if I have annihilated my animal soul, I don't even have that temptation. That's a tzaddik. If you want to know if you are a tzaddik, give yourself 5 minutes with unfiltered impulses, unfiltered thoughts, and see what comes to mind. The moment there's an impulse, a feeling that says to do something for self, of course, if it's a sinful act, but even if it's not a sinful act, even if it's a kosher act, but it is for ourselves, it's not for the purpose, it's not for our mission, it's not for God, it's not for another, right? Then already you know you're not a tzaddik, because a tzaddik is fully like subjugated and only there as a conduit for godly pursuits. That is a true tzaddik of the Tanya. And like we said, there are very, very few tzaddiks in every generation. Perhaps a handful, not more than that. We know that when we refer to a rebbe is someone who we refer to as that tzaddik, someone who just completely transformed themselves and eradicated any type of negativity within them. No nefesh habahamis at all. It says that King David has slaughtered, has killed, has destroyed his nefesh habahamis, his animal soul. I'll tell you an interesting story. So the fifth Chabad Rebbe, Rabbi Shalom Tov Beder, known as the Rebbe Rashab, living in Russia, the town of Lubavitch. And at the time, this goes back about 120 years ago, 110 years ago. At the time, there was this conference of rabbis from around Russia, Ukraine, Europe. I'm not sure exactly which countries were included. And there was a conference to deal with some of the pressing issues for the Jewish people. And many, many leading rabbis, prestigious rabbis from around the regions were coming together for this conference. And the Rebbe Rashab was there as well. And he had actually a good friend from someone more from the Lithuanian dynasty, Rabbi Chaim Brisker, another great Torah scholar. And they were having this like side discussion about one of the issues. And the Rebbe Rashab expressed himself, and he said, my feelings are that this is what we should do. That's the way he expressed himself. My feelings, I feel that this is the right thing that we should do. Okay? Rabbi Chaim Brisker, who was a genius of a man, turns to his friend, the Rebbe Rashab, and he says, feelings? Since when do we follow our feelings? You have to understand it. Does it make sense? Explain it to me. What's the rationale behind it? Just because you feel this way, therefore we should follow this path. So the Rebbe Rashab responds and says, no, you can follow my feelings. Because ever since I was a young boy or a young teenager, I have trained myself. I have trained my body. I have trained my feelings that everything that I do and feel should be in sync with the Shulchan Aruch, the code of Jewish law. In other words, it's not a typical person. It's not a typical righteous person. It's tzaddik is someone who by nature, this becomes their nature. Their nature is the godly soul. The Rebbe Rashab's mother used to testify that when her child, the Rebbe Rashab, was sleeping, and we know that we sleep with a yarmulke, the kippah, even when we're sleeping. But what happens when we're tossing and turning in bed? Often a yarmulke may fall off our head, but we're in the middle of our sleep. So whenever we wake up in the morning, oh, where's my yarmulke? Pick it up, you put it on. But the Rebbe Rashab, in his sleep, if the yarmulke fell off, he would quickly put his hand on his head, or maybe he would wake up and put it back on. He felt it. His body felt it. There's this famous story with another great tzaddik known as Rabbi Hillel of Parich. We called him Rabbi Hillel Paricher, who when he would go to sleep and someone would come and remove the mezuzah of the door on the door, he would feel it. He would wake up. I feel that I'm not sleeping in a room with a mezuzah. I mean, this is a whole nother level. This is not an ordinary person who is a righteous person. We're talking about a person who has his nefesh ha'olekis, his godly soul has fully taken over his entire psyche, his entire being. That's a tzaddik. And this is what the Tanya talks about, the highest level in this battle. Someone has completely eradicated the enemy, and his nefesh ha'olekis, his godly soul, is in full control. And like we said, it's not something that necessarily me and you could attain. It's important to study, to know what the tzaddik is, in order to know who we are. We shouldn't fool ourselves. It's very important not to fool ourselves, thinking we're something who we're not. In the Tanya, in the lexicon of the Tanya, tzaddik is someone way above. The Tanya itself says, very rare to be a tzaddik. like we said, it's about impulses. You know, you walk into the store with your child, okay, and your child sees a toy. Let's say they see Lego, or they see those little toy cars that they play with, and the child gets really, really excited about it, right? Now, if it's a young child, they start crying. Oh, I need the car. I need it. I want it. Da, 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 right? If it's an older child, maybe they know, you know what? I can't buy everything that I want, but in your heart, at least you feel, wow, I wish I had that. That looks really exciting. I wish I could buy that, right? There's this there's this little song. They made it into like a little music video that I show my kids about the story of this two fathers who were talking about when they took their children to the store, to the toy store, and what a disaster it was. When he walked to the store, everyone went crazy. I need this and I need that and that. And he couldn't give in to pressure. He ended up buying them all that they wanted. And then when he came home, 2 minutes later, they're like, Daddy, we're bored. We need very cute, a cute song and a cute video. But the point is, a child gets very excited about what? About these toys, right? Now, when we were children, I could imagine we were also excited about those same things, right? When I was a child, I saw cars. I'm like, wow, cars, this is so cool. Let me buy some. But when you get older, what is it? When you walk into the store now and you see those same cars, those toy cars, is it that you're older and you say, you know what? I know, I understand that it's not right for me to play with those toys. There's more important things in life, and therefore I'm going to hold myself back. I'm not going to purchase those cars. Is that what's going through our mind? Or do we look at it and say, it's just not for me? Couldn't care for it. I couldn't care for it, right? I would assume it's the latter, right? It's not that I want it, but I know it's not important, and therefore I'm not going to buy it. It's a waste of money. Is it that, or it's more like I don't care for it? I used to care for it. I don't care for it now. That's a tzaddik. A tzaddik isn't someone only who's able to control the impulse and say, I know it's not right for me to do, and therefore I won't do it. They have no impulse for these materialistic things. This is not who they are. They couldn't care for it. It's like in our world, what do we care for? Let's say something as we're not talking about something sinful necessarily, even something kosher pleasures, right? You go by a good restaurant and there's a good piece of steak. And the first thing that comes to your mind is it's kosher. Wow, it smells really good. I wish I could sit down and have a good steak. I enjoy that. Now you may tell yourself, I can't. I have no money. I have no time. Whatever. There's more important things for me to do now. But it's fair to say that we have a little drive to it, or maybe if it's not meat, maybe it's a ice cream shop or whatever it is, right? I enjoy it. I can't always feel that enjoyment, but I enjoy it. It's tzaddik. There's no enjoyment. There's no impulse. There's no drive to materialistic things. It's just not their world. They've graduated from that. Because that drive, even if it's a kosher drive, meaning it's not something which is sinful, it comes from our animal soul. Animal soul thinks about self. The tzaddik does not feel or think self. It's all about mission, something greater. What does God want from me? I need to eat. Why? Because I need to sustain myself. I need to have energy to serve God. It's not about the pleasures of food. And food is just one example. It's all material pursuits. That's the tzaddik. Like I said, it's above and beyond. It's really above and beyond. The Tanya then also breaks it down to two levels of tzaddik, whether it's a complete tzaddik or an incomplete tzaddik. And it really kind of gets into the nitty-gritty between the two, which is a very fine difference of how intense and how much is their love to God. And so too, how much is their disguise or the disgust and hatred to something which goes against God. Because in other words, the Tanya says it's not enough that we just don't have a drive for something materialistic. They actually disguise it. It's like this is not. How can you do this? It's like disgusting. How can you do this? How can you waste your time? There's like a certain like hatred to this type of way of life, not to the person obviously, but to the way of life. You can sit down and just enjoy these things. How can you do that? It goes antithetical to God. That how intense those feelings are is whether we compare them to whether we define them as a complete tzaddik or an incomplete tzaddik. But to generalize, a tzaddik is someone who doesn't care for materialistic pursuits. He only cares for godly pursuits, and if something which is against God, he has a problem with it. There was this great, perhaps he was a tzaddik, but he was a great chassid. His name was Rabbi Yitzchak Garevich. We knew him as Itcha, a Yiddish name, nickname Itcha. Itcha, and they would call him the Masmid, Itcha the Masmid. They call him Itcha the Masmid because a Masmid in Hebrew and Yiddish means someone who is extremely diligent in their learning, in their studying. And he was known that he would study Torah many, many, many hours of the day, of the night. He would sit through the night studying, and he was immersed in a different world. He was literally in a different world, the world of Torah, the world of godliness. He ate just to live. Literally, he ate. Give me something kosher, I'll put it in my mouth, just so I could live and continue serving God. That was his life. And he actually living in Russia, but he actually came to America. I believe it was in the 1920s. He came to America in the 1920s, and he writes a letter back to his friends in Russia. And what he writes is as follows. He says, "You won't believe what happens here in America, the American mentality." He says, "There are people here who eat meat and drink wine even in the weekday, not just Shabbos. In the weekday, can you imagine that? Eating meat and drinking wine in the weekday, and they're not even embarrassed. They're not even embarrassed, right? And we're thinking and we're laughing and said, what's for dinner? Today we're having this type of meat. Tomorrow we're having that type of meat. I mean, this is just normal, right? This is just who we are. Right? We eat meat. But for him, to sit and eat meat was a major luxury, but also was a big delicacy that was saved for like maybe a holiday, for a Shabbos. I mean, first of all, who had the money for it? Who had the money for all that meat? But also, in his mind, such indulgence in something so material. I mean, today the whole American mentality is all about food. We're using food as a good example of something materialistic, but it's all pleasures, material pleasures. Like talking about food, right? There's a whole restaurant industry, and thank God there are many, many great kosher restaurants as well. High class, great food. That whole industry, this whole concept. I'm going to my favorite restaurant, and I'm going to sit there. I'm going to look at the menu, and I'm going to choose exactly what I want. That whole thing, a tzaddik looks at that and says, "Disgusting. How can you do this? You're literally going out, and the whole thing is about good food. What makes me feel good? It's a great experience. That's what the tzaddik can't handle. Unless it's all about part of my mission, right? Today we say, okay, sometimes you need to take a little break. You need to enjoy yourself. But from a very like raw level, the tzaddik says, this whole thing it doesn't fit well with my whole service to God. And that is why, by the way, first of all, there are very few tzaddikim in history because again, it's not your regular person that serves God. But also, historically, tzaddikim were generally people who didn't really mingle and socialize with other people because they didn't have a language to talk. They couldn't relate to each other because people who are going out to restaurants and people are going on vacation and people are just having a normal life, as we call it, a normal life. For them was like, this is not what it's meant to be. It's not what it's meant to be. They don't, because they don't have the struggle. Again, it's not that they struggle and they overcome the struggle. The tzaddik is done the struggle. They have passed that stage. Again, hard to us to fathom. What does it mean for someone that wakes up in the morning and they have no struggle? Do right, do wrong, and I decide to do right. There's no struggle. This is just what it is. My body is just a conduit for the expression of my godly soul. Without any other struggle, without any other impulse, without any other... Again, it's not something that we could relate to. And the Tanya emphasizes that. The Tanya says, don't fool yourself. This isn't something that the average person could ever attain. It's something unique and something special. And that is who a tzaddik is. Historically, there was something known as the 36 hidden tzaddikim. Tzaddikim who were hidden, meaning they would live seemingly a very simple lifestyle. They would kind of maybe be out there in the woods. They were farmers. And secretly they were serving God as a tzaddik because they couldn't really mingle and socialize with other people because they literally didn't relate to them. So this is a little bit of what the Tanya describes in chapter 10, what a tzaddik is. And the truth is, we may never be a tzaddik. A tzaddik perhaps has to be born with that capability of becoming a tzaddik. However, it's in the Tanya. It's in the Tanya, which is known as the book of the Beinoni, perhaps for two reasons. One, as I mentioned previously, we can't fool ourselves. We have to know we're not a tzaddik, and we do have the struggle. And we'll talk later in chapter 11 and chapter 12 what it means to struggle, to have the struggle, and what is considered success for those who struggle, for me and you who do struggle. We're not a tzaddik. So what does that mean? So we'll talk about that in the next few chapters. But perhaps also, even though we still struggle and we're not that level, we haven't reached that level of tzaddik, but perhaps we could strive to have a tzaddik-like moments. Knowing what a tzaddik is, all the way on top, having that extreme, kind of allows us to look up sometimes and says, you know what? For the next 2 minutes, I'm going to try to be a tzaddik. For the next 5 minutes, let me strive. Let me have a few tzaddik moments in my life. So that's perhaps another takeaway from this chapter. It's a fascinating chapter. If you haven't read it inside, I strongly encourage you to read it inside, chapter 10, and leave it with that. If you have any questions, please share them now. And we should be able to continue next week, chapter 11.
So, Rabbi Mendel, so
Yeah.
we